Tonight, I'd like to share with you a few words on what I would call a Galut Geula class. It's been so many years, and we're still here. It's amazing to me. You think for a moment, the Torah makes such a big deal about the destruction of Amalek. What exactly did Amalek do that earned them the place in the Hall of Shame? Machot timchet zecher Amalek. Destroy them, wipe them out. There's no greater enemy, no greater nemesis to Borei Olam and to the Jewish people than the people of Amalek. Asher karcha baderech. You came out of Egypt. Klal Yisrael, you were on fire. You were untouchable. At that point, the world looked at us like an immortal people, a godly people. We just came out of Egypt. 10 plagues, Kriyat Yamsuf, Shamu Amim Yirgazun. The world shook in fright when they even thought of a Jew. And at that point, we were untouchable. Comes Amalek, and he does the impossible, the unheard of. He attacks a godly people. Not only does he attack us, but he attacks us in such a underhanded, sneaky way. He comes from behind. Think about this for a minute. Picture this. You have 3 million people walking in the desert. Who would you think is in the front? And who you think was in the back? In the front, generally leading the pack, you have the men, the strong and the healthy. In the back of the procession, clearly you have those who are not as strong, keeping up with the crowd. Some of the women, definitely the young children. Amalek came along and attacked from the back. Do you understand what type of a vicious enemy, a nemesis that this is to the Jewish people? He attacked the children. He attacked the women. Klal Yisrael. He attacked our weakest and our young. Machot timchet zecher Amalek. Says Rashi, mashal. Listen to this mashal and you'll understand a very powerful point that we're going to hit tonight on the story of the Meraglim that we've never touched on before. Says Rashi, it's a mashal to a very hot ambatya, a boiling hot bathtub, where the first person that jumps in, they get scolded, they get burnt, but at the same time they cool down the waters. Now the water isn't as hot, the water isn't as fiery. The next person that goes in, not nearly as the first person's burns. Amalek jumped into the boiling hot Klal Yisrael, but although they got scolded and beaten, they cooled us down. In the eyes of the world, we were still human. We're no longer immortal. We're no longer the people that beat the superpower Paro. He brought us down a notch in the eyes of the world. At that moment, the Jewish people became a people that had to struggle through the desert. Later on, Eretz Yisrael, conquering the Goyim. If not for that Amalek, they all would have stepped aside. Nobody had the chutzpah to attack Klal Yisrael at that time. Not after Kriyat Yamsuf. Not after the 10 Makot. He humanized us. Amalek humanized the Jewish people. He brought us down a notch in the eyes of the world. And because of that, Machot timchet zecher Amalek. We would not have had to fight a war. Do you understand that? If not for Amalek, we would not have needed any spies. We would not have fought anyone in the desert. We would have walked into Israel and we would have walked straight in and taken over. And no one would have had the chutzpah to stand up against us. The only reason why they had the chutzpah to fight and attack us is because Amalek cooled us down in the eyes of the world. Now you're thinking to yourself, Rabbi, this week's parsha is Shlach Lecha Anashim. What in the world does this have to do with Amalek? I want to tell you something frightening. And I'm hoping that you'll connect the dots. The same way Amalek humanized us and brought us down a notch in the eyes of the people of the world, the sin of the Meraglim brought Eretz Yisrael down a notch and humanized it in the eyes of the Jewish people. What I'm telling you now is a big vart. It needs a little bit of processing. Every time a Jew complains that he doesn't want to go to Israel, every time a Jew complains, I don't want to live in Eretz Yisrael, I don't want to go there, it's not for me, you should understand, the only way that could be possible, the whole concept of a chutz la'aretz came from this parsha, because they brought the reverence and the awesomeness and the kedusha in the eyes of the people down a notch. The ambatya of Eretz Yisrael is not as haste, it's not as hot. When we were going into Eretz Yisrael, we were going into the land of God. We were going into a land that was going to be the place that was going to be mashlim. The entire Torah, the avodah, the mitzvot, hatluyot be'eretz Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu was crying, Borei Olam, please, let me in. Let me in. Says Chazal, what was it? What was it? What was bo'er in Moshe so much that he was so insistent to go to Eretz Yisrael? According to one side of the Gemara, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to do at least, let me do the mitzvot, hatluyot be'eretz Yisrael, the mitzvot that can only be done in Israel, that cannot be done anywhere else. Says Moshe, I'm chaser. I've been given 613 commandments to connect to you, to come close to you, but some of them are totally in Eretz Yisrael, and until I get there, the trumot, the ma'asarot, the Shemitah, the Shvi'it, the Yovel, all the famous laws of Eretz Yisrael, I can't serve you. I can't come that close to you because I'm losing out on the opportunities, these golden diamond mitzvot that only Eretz Yisrael can have. And guess what? It wasn't just Moshe Rabbeinu. Every Jew looked at Eretz Yisrael as the promised land. Literally, the promised land, the way it was meant to be. And there was no negotiation, there was nothing to talk about. Eretz Yisrael is the land of Hashem. When they thought about going to Eretz Yisrael, when they were in the Midbar, they were thinking about going home. We're going back to the land of Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. We're going home to the land that our roots, our DNA, our family originated from. Could you imagine how they were longing to go to Eretz Yisrael? Could you imagine how much they were dying for the Kedusha of an Eretz Yisrael, Avir di Yisrael Machkim, when coming from Paro and Egypt, the capital of the immorality of the world, coming to the capital of the holiness of the world. Could you imagine Zulu Matzu going from one to the other, two extremes? How they were so longing to get into Eretz Yisrael, it was untouchable. And they would have been untouchable if not for two. If not for Amalek, who made the Jewish people touchable and no longer immortal in the eyes of the world. Now we're going to have to fight. Instead of just walking in and everyone just bowing and laying their arms and saying, no one can touch the Jews. After what happened to Paro, after what happened to Kriyat Yam Suf, after what happened to the 10 Makot, no one can touch the Jews. They're an untouchable people. No one would have dared to attack us, if not for Amalek. We would have walked into Eretz Yisrael, and the Knani, the Emori, the Chizi, the Prizi, the Yevusi, they would have put down their arms, and they would have said, the land is yours, we're out of here. We can't go up against you. We know what you did to Paro. We know what you did to the superpower of Egypt. That's the way the show would have been, should have been. And because we were humanized, we lost it. This week's parasha, Eretz Yisrael, was humanized. They came back with a bad report. Always ask yourself, the famous kasha of the Hafetz Chaim, they always talk about the Lashon Hara, that the Meraglim spoke about Eretz Yisrael. Ask the Hafetz Chaim, Lashon Hara, Eitzim va'avanim. What Lashon Hara? They spoke about a land. They spoke about something that wasn't so. It's Eitzim va'avanim, not something that's alive, not a person. Eretz Yisrael was alive up until they did what they did. Hear what I'm telling you. Eretz Yisrael was alive up until they destroyed her with that Lashon Hara. And they made her into Eitzim va'avanim. Originally, she was not Eitzim va'avanim in the eyes of Klal Yisrael. She was a Lebedik land. She was a land of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. You need to understand this. Sometimes we answer a kasha with a teretz, and sometimes we show that the kushya wasn't a kasha in the first place. What was your question, Eretz Yisrael? It's a land, it's not a person, it's not alive. What's the Lashon Hara? The teretz says that your question is faulty. Before the Meraglim, Eretz Yisrael was Lebedik. It was alive. It was an Eretz that was mamish, zavat halab udvash, both in the physical and in the spiritual. It flowed with so much life. And because when you speak about a Lebedika person and you bring down and degrade their outlook in the eyes of others, you've killed them. That's why Lashon Hara is tantamount to the Gimel Averot Chamurot. Says the Rambam, bringing the Yerushalmi, that when someone speaks Lashon Hara, it's tantamount to Shvichat Damim, Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot. The pshat is that you put this person into such a degrading light in the eyes of people that they looked at him so low, so lowly. You killed him. You dirtied him. You made him foreign. Avodah Zara. You made him a foreign person to his people. Shvichat Damim. You killed him. Gilui Arayot. You exposed him in a very improper way to the eyes of people that once respected him. Do you hear a beautiful pshat in how Lashon Hara is tantamount to the Gimel Averot Chamurot? That's what they did to Eretz Yisrael. She was Lebedik, and they killed her. She was Lebedik, and they exposed her in a very unruly manner with their report. She was Lebedik, and they made her Avodah Zara, a foreign place to us, instead of a piece of us. It made it a foreign place to us. Instead of a piece of our history, a piece of our home, a piece of our fathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we're going home. Comes back to Meraglim and says, you're going nowhere. It's not home anymore. You know how much distance they just put between Eretz Yisrael and us? You know the zarut, the zara, that they just created between us and Eretz Yisrael? It's now zara. It's foreign. It's away from us. She was Lebedik. And this Lashon Hara destroyed her in the eyes of the people. And today, if you ever hear a Jew speaking a disparagingly speech against Eretz Yisrael, It's only because there was once a Meraglim. It wasn't possible for a Jew to have any negative vibe or speech or feelings to Eretz Yisrael until the Meraglim brought her down a notch. What Amalek did to Klal Yisrael in the eyes of the world, the Meraglim did to Eretz Yisrael in the eyes of her people. What an Einfall. So we need a big remedy. We need a big remedy. Says Borei Olam. How can we fix this? This is the Avera that introduced Tisha B'Av to Klal Yisrael. This was the night that they cried a b'chiyah of b'chinam. And Hashem says, because you cried the b'chiyah of chinam, this is going to be a night that's going to be koveya l'dorot, the Bayit Rishon, the Bayit Sheni, World War I, World War II, all Tisha B'Av bound. Wow, what a sin. You would never expect it from such giants of great people. And they had good meaning. They thought that they were helping the people. They thought that they were helping the door. They thought that they were actually better off in the desert. Stay here. You have a kollel of 3 million people. They're learning from Bat Kol Dvar Hashem. They're living off of the man. They have the Be'er Miriam. What else could you want? Says the Borei Olam, I didn't create angels. This wasn't the life that I meant. I want you to be able to live as a gavra, as a person. Shomer Torah mitzvot. I want you to have the laws of agriculture. I can give you the mitzvot of Eretz Yisrael. I want you to come home and be able to build a home in Klal Yisrael, not just a tent in the desert. This isn't what I went. This is what I wanted for you. I wanted for you to have a makom, that your Eretz would be a place that you get attached to and you'll draw from it Kedusha, Avir di Yisrael Machkim, Avira di Yisrael Machkim. And instead, exactly the opposite. It bothers me sometimes. You hear people talking, I just came back from Israel, this, and that. They start complaining. This guy and the taxi driver and the service guy, and then the attitude. That's what you came home with? That's the report you came home with? Ay, ay, ay. Says Borei Olam. How do we remedy this? So I'm going to tell you a thought. And this is something that I was working on with over the years. I saw this mentioned in the Mefarshim, and I believe it's something to really hit home hard. Moshe Rabbeinu cries out, 515 tefillot, please let me into Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ravlach. Amazing. Moshe was the one who said to Korach, Rav lachem b'nei Levi. Enough. You have enough. Hashem used those same words. Moshe Rabbeinu, Ravlach. Enough. You cannot go to Eretz Yisrael. The mitzvot that you have, the fact that you had what you had here in the Midbar, enough. Moshe Rabbeinu begs, he cries. Says Borei Olam, okay, I'll be Merachim and I'll give you just one little preview. I want to tell you something, Rabotai. Maybe it's because I'm an emotional person. Every time the Torah reads the parasha Moshe Rabbeinu going up to Har Nevo in Vizot HaBeracha, and Hashem tells him, Moshe, Her'iticha be'enecha, v'shama lo ta'avor. You can look at it with your eyes, but you can't go there. You ask yourself, what's pshat? Don't you melt, don't you cry, Moshe Rabbeinu. He gave his life, he gave everything for a Jewish people. And he got nothing in return. Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to pick up his hands and say, Borel, Lo chamor echat. I didn't take anything from them. Nothing, not a salary. Nothing. I took nothing from them. All I did was give my life for them and sacrifice and stick up for them, daven for them, defend them, save them from the Maaseh Egel. I'm just asking for one thing. Let me in. Let me go into Eretz Yisrael. What does Hashem do? He dangles it in front of him. Isn't that a tease of a lifetime? Imagine you're walking by Toys R Us and your 6-year-old I know it's a bad example, but it's just the idea. And your 6-year-old tells you, Dad, this is one of the only Toys R Us left that's open. Most of them are bankrupt, they're all out. Says, Dad, this is one of the only Toys R Us left. Can we go in? And then the kid always starts reminding you, you owe me an afikomen present last year, Hanukkah, you didn't really get me anything. Zaidi, Bubby promised me for my birthday. They have, it's amazing. The kids that they think sometimes have all the learning discipline, but when it comes to the stuff that they're became on the spot with unbelievable memories in detail, vivid. So he said, okay, I'll take you into Toys R Us. But you could only look at the toys. You can't touch anything. We're not buying anything. You know what you're doing to this kid, this poor kid? You're bringing him inside. You're walking him up down the aisles. His jaw drops. He's salivating by the sides of his lips. And he's thinking, please, no, nothing. Please, just one thing. No, just small thing by the checkout counter. 0. Why would you do that to the kid? Why would you do that to anybody? Why would you do that to anybody? I mean, really, why would you do that to anybody? Heriticha beinecha, v'shama lo ta'avor, ale har nevo. I mean, well, what's the pshat? Why would Hashem do that? Rabbatai, listen to me well. The same Moshe Rabbeinu that was gifted with a koach to save an entire generation from the biggest flaw, the biggest sin, the Egel. Davening from Rosh Chodesh Elul, 40 days, 40 nights, until the 40th day, Yom HaKippurim, where finally Hashem says, Salachti kidvarecha. Because of you, I forgive them. Moshe Rabbeinu was the father, Rabban Shel Yisrael. He cleaned up our messes. That's what it means to be a manhig. That's what it means to be a leader. Lo kam bi Yisrael od ke Moshe. We never had a shepherd, a leader, a selfless noseh be'ol chavero, like a Moshe Rabbeinu. Lo kam v'lo kam. Never will there be, never there was, outside of Moshe Rabbeinu, Adon Kol HaNevi'im. He is the manhig of manhigim. According to our Chaim HaKadosh, Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach. Asks the Orach HaKadosh, but he doesn't come from Shevet Yehuda. He's from Levi. Says Orach HaKadosh, good kasha. V'hamevin yavin. Moshe is kolel kol Yisrael. That's what he says. Psh, wow. Unbelievable. 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 Moshe Rabbeinu cleans up the mess of an entire generation. Look at the ability of one great manhig, one great gadol, one great Jew. You can clean up the world. You can. If you believe that you could, you can. You be'etzem have the kochot. You be'etzem have the kochot. The famous vart of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha, that when you take a look at halacha and you see over there that a goyish nurse, a wet nurse, is not allowed to feed a young Jewish infant if the mother cannot feed. And the pshat is because Moshe Rabbeinu would not feed from a wet nurse. Says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Moshe Rabbeinu! But this kid is a regular kid. Says Rabbi Yaakov, from here you see that every Jewish child that's born to Klal Yisrael has the Yecholet to be the next Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore we don't let you mess up his path at such a young age. We don't let him suckle from a goyisha nurse. We don't allow him such chalav to enter such a heilige moil, a heilige peh. And therefore, no, I think it's more sending a message to the parent than even to the child. We're telling the parent, we're not going to let you allow your child to suckle from a goyisha wet nurse, because tedu lachem, this baby could be the next Moshe Rabbeinu. You better bring him up that way. My kid? Nah. Yeah, your kid. My kid? Yeah, your kid. You would hear the stories about Gidolim and the families they came from. It wasn't always that every Gadol came from a Gadol. Lav Dafka. I don't want to say any names, not to bring anything disparaging to families of the great ones of Klal Yisrael. But you and I both know plenty of great giant Gidolim that their parents were simple, regular Jews. And they were zochet to bring up a Moshe of a generation. Moshe Rabbeinu's job was to clean up an entire generation. And guess what? He didn't just do it once. He didn't just do it by the Egel. Borei Olam was coming to wipe out Klal Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu, says the Gemara in Berachot in the 5th Perek, he grabbed Borei Olam Kivyachol by the glima, and he said, I'm not letting you go until you forgive them. And Borei Olam says, Heref ashmidem, leave me, let me go and wipe them. And Moshe chapped that Hashem said, leave me, meaning if you don't leave me, I won't wipe them out. Says, oh, here's my chance, says Moshe Rabbeinu. He grabs on tighter. He speaks stronger. He davens 40 days, 40 nights. Until finally, Borei Olam says, Salachti kidvarecha. And then came the Meraglim. And the Meraglim was the next terrible pitfall of the Avera of a generation. It was on that night, every year, that Klal Yisrael would go into their graves on that night and wait to see if they would wake up the next morning in the Dor HaMidbar before they went to Eretz Yisrael. Do you know that? Do you know that the next year on that same night, Tisha B'Av, they would dig their own graves in the Midbar, they would go inside the grave and sleep and hope that they would wake up the next morning, because every year they would die on that night. The Dor HaMidbar would not enter Eretz Yisrael because they fell to the sin of the Meraglim. Only their children would enter, but not the Zikanim, not the original door of Yotzei Mitzrayim. Did you know that? This was a colossal sin. It was in the realm of an Egel. It was a sin that brought Tisha B'Av to Klal Yisrael. All future destruction was the story of the Meraglim. How are we going to fix it? How is Moshe going to clean up this act? How is Moshe going to clean up this mess? And the answer is, Ale, go up to Har Nevo. Look, Heriticha be'enecha. Yearn, beg, cry, to want to go in and be the Rebbe of Klal Yisrael, to reinstill the love and the beauty of Eretz Yisrael in the hearts and in the souls of every Jew. It's amazing what he did. It's amazing what he did. By going up that mountain and Borei Olam dangling Eretz Yisrael in front of his eyes, it gave Moshe Rabbeinu the opportunity to reinstill in Klal Yisrael the yearning for Eretz Yisrael. This wasn't a tease. This was a kapara for a generation. He put it back in our bones. That love, that fire, that wanting that hashibut, the prestige of an Eretz Yisrael, what it originally meant to us before the Lashon Hara, before you killed her. Before you killed her, before you did the Ritzicha, the Shvichat Damim, before you did the Gilui Arayot, before you did all the terrible sins that are all incorporated in that Lashon Hara. Moshe Rabbeinu brought her back to life in the eyes of the people. Wow, look how he's yearning to go. Wow, look how he's crying and begging, 515 tefillot. Look how he went up to the top of a mountain and he looks at her and he begs and screams, I want to go in. Let me in. And the people are watching him. They say, wow, Taka, he's right. We forgot what Eretz Yisrael really meant to us. And that's why today we have a split screen situation. We have some Jews that are still affected by the virus of the Meraglim and don't understand nor appreciate what Eretz Yisrael means to us. And if you ever hear a Jew speaking disparagingly about Eretz Yisrael, you'll understand that this stemmed from this week's parsha, because it was never possible before they brought it down a notch in our eyes. But Tedu lachem, the next time you see a Jew that's standing online for hours, waiting to get on a flight, a connecting flight, with a 10-hour stopover, just to get to Eretz Yisrael, you'll understand that that's a shtick Moshe Rabbeinu. You got to get this. You got to get this. The love and the fire that we have for Israel today comes from the Rebbe, who fixed the generation's second flaw. And he put back in us that fire and love to fight for Klal Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael for what it was meant to stand for. It's opening up slowly, slowly. I've heard so many people have such worries about taking the vaccine. I don't blame them. Who knows? So many conspiracy theories about where COVID came from. And was it taka from a lab? Was it a mistake? Was it planted? Did it come from the Democrats to bring down Trump? I mean, the theories can go on and on. I assume that's what the whole YouTube is based on. That's how they get their business. It's the theories, them in Inquirer magazine. It's the unbelievable gossip and theories and crazy stuff that they come up with. And it might be true. Who knows these days? The world is olam hafuch ra'iti. We're living in an upside down world where nothing is the way it seems and nothing seems the way it is. And what you see in today's world, you don't get. Everything's behind the mask, not just the COVID mask. And behind the mask of Galut, there's nothing clear anymore. Nothing. So who knows what's going on and what this whole concept was? We don't know. People told me, don't do it. The vaccine, you're not going to have kids anymore. Don't do it. The vaccine, they're planting in you DNA transmitters in order to know exactly where you're going. And I've never seen anyone give up their iPhone because they can track you with it. That's a different schmooze, I guess. All of a sudden, everyone's worried about being tracked. When it came to the iPhone, are you joking? Don't you go near my phone. My phone? Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo? Amen. Are you joking me? I live on this phone. I breathe on this phone. I have an app that allows me to breathe on this phone. If not for that app, I don't even know if I'd make it. And he's attached to that phone by the umbilical cord. But the minute he heard that maybe there's something transmitted, no, I can't take the shot. I want to tell you something. Let the chips fall where they may. Let the rumors and conspiracy theories come out. If that vaccine gets me to Israel even one more time in my life, I will take it again and again and again. I took it. I took the second round. It hurt a little bit the second round, to be honest. I couldn't raise my arm for almost 3 days. But every moment that I had some sort of pain, and during that first night when I couldn't sleep so much, woke up in the middle of the night sweating, I said, Eibishter, I love you, Eretz Yisrael. I love her. I love her from the bottom of my heart. And this is going to get me in. I'll take a bullet for her any day of the week. I'm going. For the last year, I was in the matzav of Her'iticha be'einecha v'shama lo ta'avor. I am done watching videos of what's going on in Israel. I am done watching videos of these cubicles that they put up by the kotel. My kotel, the kotel that I used to wake up vatikin for 40 days and daven for major tefillot and major yeshuot. I'm done going and seeing these pictures of the craziness that's going on in Eretz Yisrael and the different mekomot hakadoshim. I want to go. I want to be there. I want to walk on the land again. I want to daven by the kotel again. I want one more. I want Abba. I want a vatikin by the kotel. I want to stand there with 1,000 people and 20 different nuschaot, and you hear Mamish Klal Yisrael in their pe'er of flavor of differences in unity. Did you hear those words? Differences in unity. Perfect unity and perfect difference. The Hasidim, the Ashkenazim, the Sfaradim, the every type of Jew, and it's such a beauty. And then at that same split second, at the moment of Vatikin, the roar of 1,000 people go eerie silent. Absolutely silent. And you feel the presence of the King. And you could practically lean on Kisei HaKavod as you lean on the stones and you whisper your bakashot between the stones. Say, Abba, I have your presence. I can feel you. I have your ear. I'm relying on you. Help me. I'm standing here at the door of your house by Shar HaShamayim. Do I want that again? I want to jump in a rent-a-car and go up north. I want to go to Tveri. I want to go up that mountain and look over the Kinneret and walk into Rabbi Meir Balanes and get the Ayin Hara guy over there, make him a few bucks, and let him take off all the Ayin Hara from these videos. And then after that, go into Rabbi Meir Balanes and walk up to Reb Meir. Reb Meir was buried standing up because he gave honor to the Jewish people. Do you know that every time I go to Reb Meir Balanes' kever, I walk up, I hug it. I feel bad sometimes when I do it to the people, but I hug the kever, I hold the kever, I put my arms as much around the Elahad Meir Aneni signs that they have on top, and I hold it tight, and I literally say Elahad Meir Aneni, Elahad Meir Aneni, Elahad Meir, Reb Meir, Benkach ubenkach banim atem Hashem Elokechem. Go up to Abba in the zechut of your kever and tell him that Duvi ben Shushan is here. I made mistakes in life. We all made mistakes, but we love Abba. Tell him to forgive everything. Tell him to give us a tremendous aliyah in Avodat HaKodesh. Tell him to bring a geula, because we know the last stop that the Shechina had in Eretz Yisrael before it left was Tveria. Says Rabbi Yochanan, if it was the last stop on the way out, it's going to be the first stop on the way in when Mashiach comes. I went to the wife of Rabbi Akiva in Tveria. Right next to her, there was a little plot of land that they were selling kvarim with a little blue sign with a phone number if you wanted to buy the kvarim. I called up the guy on the spot. The guy heard my broken Hebrew American accent. The price tripled on the phone from the beginning of the conversation to the end of the conversation, and I don't care. I told the guy, Ani mukhan l'shalem. I'll buy a spot for me and my wife. My wife was listening to this phone call. She gives me she said, what are you crazy? We're young. I said, I know we're young, but let's just remember who we can be buried next to. You want to be buried in the George Washington Cemetery off of Ocean Parkway, listening to the D train every night? Is that what you want? or you want to be next to Eshet Rabbi Akiva? I said, honey, you're an Eshet Rabbi Akiva because you put up with me all these years, driving back and forth to Brooklyn, to Lakewood, every weekend, every Shabbat. You're an Eshet Rabbi Akiva. Nobody would do that. You got to be Meshuggah to do that for your husband. But you did it for my Torah. You deserve to be here next to her. She straightens her back. You're right. Go down to the Rambam. You walk into the Rambam. And the first Torah says, Mishnah Torah Rambam. And as you walk down the path, it says another one of the Svarim of the Mishnah Torah, the crown of the Rambam, the crown jewel of Maimonides, Nezikin, Avoida. Each one after the next. Wow, this is unbelievable. You're walking into the Rambam world. You know how many times I walked up to the Rambam and I had in my notebook steers and Rambams from a whole year's worth of the prior year of Be'iyun's Gimarot, Shiurim that we give here in the shul every morning at 8 o'clock. And I held them because I knew I'm going to go to the Rambam and ask him. And I went to the Rambam and said, Rambam, I gave a share 3 months ago. This was the sugya. We mentioned your Rambam. We mentioned the stira. It was asked by the Lechem Mishnah, the Magid Mishnah. Reb Chaim Briska has a mahalach. The Briska Rav has a mahalach. I heard a beautiful mahalach from my Rebbe, from Reb Elchanan Wasserman. This is what we said. Ta'ir einai. Give me siyata d'shmaya to learn your svarim. Give me siyata d'shmaya to become something in Klal Yisrael, to be able to teach and be marbitz Torah in Klal Yisrael. Please give me siyata d'shmaya. You know who I was asking for siyata d'shmaya in a Shvera Rambam? The Rambam! That's who I was asking. And then I would remind the Rambam of the famous Maisa with my great-grandfather, Rabbi Yehuda ben Shushan. On the day that he died, the Rambam was in the room when he was murdered on Yom Kippur, because he gave his life al Yedei Kiddush Hashem to save the Rambam's life. And I said, our families are connected whether you like it or not. I want siyata d'shmaya and learning. Ask the Rebbeinu Shalom to help me, especially with the Rambams. Do you understand what these trips are about? Where are you going to? Disneyland? Miami Beach? Where are you going to? Where are you going to? Really? Really? Where are you going to? Where are you going to? The Bahamas? Where are you going to? Where are you going to? I'm going to an island. What island? There's not enough time. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. You leave the Rambam, you go to Rabbi Akiva, Rabban Shal Yisrael, who died al Yedei Kiddush Hashem. You go up to Tzfat, you dip in the Arizal's mikveh, and everybody knows. That's mechaper on everything. You walk out shaking. It's as cold as the Madura of cold. Go to Maram Bet Yosef. You go down to Amuka. This gives us such a charge. We come back as a Jew. We start remembering what we hear about. We start remembering what our tafkid is in this world. We start remembering what we were meant to do in life. All the things that we thought before the trip were important become ridiculous. And all the things that we swept under the carpet and forgot the real purposes and priorities of why we were put here in life suddenly becomes main screen again. Finally, the Iker is the Iker and the Tuffle is the Tuffle. Without Eretz Yisrael, where do you get your charge from? Where do you get your battery refilled? I'll take that shot any day of the week. Heriticha be'enecha b'shama lo ta'avor. Hashem was not teasing Moshe Rabbeinu on the top of that mountain. He was giving Moshe the ability to refill our batteries and reinstill our love for Eretz Yisrael. We should be zocheh b'karov to get to Eretz Yisrael. Another vatikim by the kotel. Another few drops of tears by Mama Rachel Imenu. Another few tefillot by a Rambam for Siyata Dishmaya in our Be'iyun learning. Another few tears by Maram Bet Yosef to be Zoiche, to bring the halacha kehilchita, Shmaita aliba de hilchita. But more than anything, another few tears by the Kotel to ask Abba, it's time, enough, let us home.